Hey, thanks for stopping by for our Bible study. It's where we read the ancient texts and see how it applies to everyday life. We're all about loving God, loving others as we love ourselves. And if this is your first time joining, glad you're here. You don't have to catch up. You can just dive right in. I'm going to give you a brief backstory, let you know where we were last week, and we're just going to jump into the message for this week. We're looking at the life of Paul, and he has just come back from his third mission journey, and he's in Jerusalem for Pentecost. He is arrested because of a mob that had developed outside of the synagogue. So there were these Jewish men from Asia who had come into Jerusalem for Pentecost. And they saw Paul running around nearby the temple with a non-Jew. And later they saw him inside the synagogue, inside the temple courts. And they dragged him out and said, hey, you brought a Gentile, non-Jew, into the synagogue. And not only that, but here you are blaspheming the Jewish religion, telling people that they don't have to become Jewish to get to God. I know, right? And that what we're doing is wrong. Yeah, no, that's not really what was going on. So they are falsely accusing him of these things, which is punishable by death. And so they begin to strike him, and the Roman centurion comes over, sees what's going on, arrests Paul to kind of save him, and that false accusation, which had caused a riot, ended up Paul, before he's put into the barracks, asking the commander, the Roman commander, can I just speak to them for a minute? So Paul turns around, speaks to this angry Jewish mob in Aramaic, which is the language of the Jews at the time. They were like, wait, what? He's us? So they listened to him until he said that, hey, it's been impressed upon my heart by God to go and tell everybody that they were created in his image and that they too can have a relationship without having to do all this. And I'm paraphrasing, okay? That crowd erupted, and we studied that last week after Paul mentions being sent to tell the good news about having a personal relationship with God that doesn't doesn't force you through religion to get there. And now these Jews in the mob are demanding Paul's execution. So this Roman commander last week ordered Paul to be flogged and interrogated or questioned. And then as the soldier was getting ready to flog Paul, Paul says, is it legal to do this to a Roman citizen? The guy was like, wait, what, you're Roman? And he was like, yeah. So shocked, the soldiers go to the commander, since it is illegal to do this to a Roman citizen without a trial. So now this commander's like, what are we going to do? He withdraws the order to flog and interrogate Paul, and he's fearful because if he does this, and Paul's even already in chains, which is against the law for Roman citizens to even be put in chains unless they've been tried. So what's this commander going to do next? And that's where we land for tonight. Tonight's message comes from Acts 22. We'll finish up that last verse just to help us dive into the rest of the verses that we have for tonight, which is Acts 23. And I think we're going to be going through 1 through 10, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 1 through 10. Let's dive. The next day, determined to get to the root of the trouble and know for sure what was behind the Jewish accusations with Paul, the captain released Paul and ordered a meeting of the high priests and the high council to see what they could make of it. Paul was led in and took his place before them. Now, who are these priests and the high council? The high council here is called the Sanhedrin. Now we've got the Roman commander, Claudius Lysias, and he's still trying to figure out exactly why the Jews hate this dude. And he decides to bring him before the Sanhedrin. This is the Jewish ruling council, and the commander's just trying to get some clarity. Like, why do you guys hate this guy? So let's talk for a minute about the Sanhedrin, because it's going to help us with the rest of the verses that we're studying tonight. The Sanhedrin, this is a loose analogy, okay? So take it for what it's worth. If you're watching in the United States, I know many of you are watching in other countries. The United States has a government wherein there is a Senate. And in that Senate, there are Republicans and Democrats. So the Sanhedrin is somewhat like the U.S. Senate in that way. Although the Sanhedrin is a religious and legal entity for the Jewish people rather than a political one. So there are in the Sanhedrin two groups, not Democrats and Republicans, but Pharisees and Sadducees. And both groups served as councils of leaders who debated, made decisions for the Jewish people, interpreted laws, both written laws, laws of Moses, and all these other laws that were in the first 5 books, are in the first 5 books of the Bible. These ancient texts, which include Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. So these gentlemen oversee the interpretation of those, and also the oral law, those things that came down through the rabbis. So the Sanhedrin governed moral, religious, and some civil matters that were under Roman oversight, but for the most part, the Romans handled the governmental and political affairs, and the Jews handled all of the religious, moral affairs of the people. So here we have the Sanhedrin with 2 religious groups, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, like I said. Let me tell you a little bit about both. The Pharisees, to start with, they believed in the resurrection of the dead. They believed in spirits. They believed in angels. They believed in both the written law, those first 5 books I just mentioned, and they also believed in the oral law, or those laws that were passed down from rabbi to rabbi and into the synagogues. They believed that God's law could be applied to daily life, and so they focused on the observance of that and the interpretation of the law in order to live out those first 5 books that we know of today in their daily lives at the time. And they were very popular among the common people, and they had influence in the local synagogues where they were. The Sadducees, much more focused on temple ritual. They were focused on sacrifices. They were focusing on the financial side of things as well. So they didn't believe in the resurrection of the dead. They didn't believe in the oral law coming down from the rabbis. It's written or is not law. And they also didn't believe in these angels and spirits that the Pharisees believed in. So Paul understands this dynamic as he's standing before the Sanhedrin with the commander there and the Pharisees and the Sadducees seated before him with high priests who were operating on the day-to-day activities within the synagogues. And again, this is Pentecost, so everybody's there in Jerusalem during this time. Let's read on. Paul surveyed the members of the council with a steady gaze and then said his piece. Friends, I've lived with a clear conscience before God all my life, up until this very moment. And that right there set the chief priest Ananias off. He ordered his aides to slap Paul in the face. Ooh, it's getting a little heated up in here, isn't it? So Paul begins claiming his innocence, and he declares that he's lived a good conscience before God. He's clear. He sleeps good at night. And this high priest says to one of his admin, hey, and slaps him. So Paul gets struck in front of this thing, in front of this little meeting. And this is an act of disrespect and legal punishment, since Paul hasn't been convicted of anything, and he is a Roman. Now, he's also a Jew. He was raised Jew. We've heard about that last week. But he's like, hey, I may go ahead and continue to do the things that I'm doing because I am a Jew, but you don't have to do that to get to God. So, Paul, what does he do next? Let's read on. Paul shot back. God will slap you down. What a fake you are. You sit there and judge me by the law and then break the law by ordering me slapped around? The aides were scandalized. How dare you talk to God's chief priest like that? Paul acted surprised. How was I to know he was a chief priest? He doesn't act like a chief priest. You're right. The scripture does say, don't speak abusively to a ruler of the people. Sorry. Interesting, isn't it? Isn't it? I'm reading out of the Message version tonight, by the way, and you can download the Bible app in your app store. And the icon is a little brown book that says Holy on it. There are countless versions of the Bible on there. I just happen to be reading from the Message. So he calls Ananias a hypocrite and says that God's going to strike him down for what he just did. And then these aides are trying to reprimand Paul, and he quickly apologizes tongue-in-cheek, right? He didn't know it was a high priest. Gosh, he's not even acting like a high priest. So let's read on. Paul, knowing some of the council was made up of Sadducees and the others Pharisees, and how they hated each other, decided to exploit their antagonism. Let's just pit them one against the other, Paul's thinking in his mind, right? Let's read on. Friends, I am an unwavering Pharisee. Oh boy. From a long line of Pharisees. It's because of my Pharisee convictions, the hope and resurrection of the dead, that I've been hauled into this court. The riot didn't begin over a false, over an accusation of him believing in the resurrection of the dead. If you recall, a few minutes ago, I explained to you that the reason why he was, that riot began in the streets is because these Jews from Asia dragged him out because they thought that he had taken a non-Jew into the temple. Way to stir the pot. Paul, he's a shit stirrer. The Sanhedrin hearing, it happened because the Romans wanted to find out the reason for the arrest, okay? So Paul uses the differences of the Pharisees and the Sadducees to reveal their hypocrisy among themselves and then turn them against one another to his advantage, and is strategic, and it gets to focus off of him. Let's see what happens. The moment Paul said this, the council split right down the middle. Pharisees and Sadducees going at each other in heated argument. Sadducees having nothing to do with a resurrection or angels or even a spirit. If they can't see it, they don't believe it. And the Pharisees believe it all. And so a huge and noisy quarrel broke out. Ooh, sounds like another riot, only it was a matter of infighting with the high Jewish council. Can you imagine? We read on. Then some of the religious scholars on the Pharisee side shouted down the others. We don't find anything wrong with this man. Of course not, he's a Pharisee. And what if a spirit has spoken to him? Or maybe an angel? And what if it turns out that we're actually fighting against God? That was fuel on the fire. The quarrel flamed up and became so violent. The Roman captain was afraid that they would tear Paul apart limb from limb, and he ordered the soldiers to get him out of there and escort him back to safety at the barracks. Have you ever read this before? If you've been to church, did they ever preach on this? Have you ever heard this before? I haven't. It's good when you can sit down and dive in verse for verse, isn't it? So, Claudius Lysias, the captain here, of what would essentially be anywhere between 600 and 1,000 men under his command. That didn't work. So, the trial wasn't fair or just. It was filled with bias, political, religious infighting, hostility. And here's this Roman commander. He plays a key role because he's an outsider. He's not a Jew. He's a Roman who's been assigned to this territory and from a very political position, governmental position. And he's trying to make sense of this deeply religious conflict that he doesn't even understand. And all he can do is say, hey, I know he's Roman, and there hasn't been a trial yet. So after this violent dispute in the Sanhedrin between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, this Claudius Lysias, this captain, commander, is left confused, but cautious, because he still doesn't know exactly what Paul has done wrong, right? And so he realizes that the issue obviously isn't about Roman law, because it's stirring up the Jews. And there's some sort of theological dispute, obviously, because they were going back and forth, the Sadducees and the Pharisees, about their beliefs within the religion. And so the commander's main concern right now is Paul's safety, because he's a Roman. And since this mob nearly tore him apart 2 days ago, and now we're seeing this uprising, we're in the middle of a quandary, are we not? And Paul, he's just dragged right out of there and back to the barracks for safety. Here's some key takeaways for us tonight in these 11, 12 verses. Keep a clear conscience before God. Paul said that. Hey, I stand before you with a clear conscience before God up to this very moment. Can you scan over your life in self-reflection and go to bed tonight with a clear conscience before God? Stay honest in your motives, in your actions, and before reacting, ask, would God be pleased with how I'm handling this? Am I demonstrating God's love in this situation? And also, be quick to make things right. Oftentimes, we're so heated in the moment that we're slinging words and objects and everything else, trying to make a point. Our emotions are uncanned and out of control. And we do and say things and think things that are not good. Let's just put it that way. And it causes us to do things wrong if we don't watch ourselves. It's okay to get angry. Don't sin in the midst of your anger, right? And so be quick to make things right. Realize if you acted or have spoken wrongly, and humble yourself and correct it so that you can live with a clear conscience. Live transparently. Integrity means a lot. It still does today. Doing the right thing when no one else is watching. It's amazing to me how you'll see someone who is supposed to be doing a certain job, but they're on their phone, and as soon as someone comes around the corner, they're doing their job. No, there's no integrity there. Do the job when no one's watching, because that's what you were paid to do, right? Work as if you're working for God, not for humanity. So live with integrity. And check your heart regularly. Take a few moments each day and reflect. That is what meditation is. Some of you Christians get so jacked about the word meditation, and yet repeatedly we see how Jesus meditated. I don't understand where the hang-up is. This is just a time of self-reflection before God. Sit and be quiet. Allow God to speak to you. In the Old Testament, it says, search my heart, O God. Right? Illuminate anything that's not good in me. I'm paraphrasing. But check your heart. Did I act in love today? Did I represent the great Spirit of God well? Did I allow the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, to operate in me and through me today? It's Psalm 139. And if you can get to Psalm 139, you'll have to read through the verses. I got you to the neighborhood. You're going to have to find the house. But it says, search my heart, O God. It's a time of meditation. We're not there praying for things. We're self-reflecting. And test me. Know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting, right? That I would have eternal impact here and beyond. This was one of David's prayers, King David, and it showed up in Psalms. So asking God to examine your inner life and laying your inner life bare before God allows the Spirit to begin to do a work in you. You'll feel something, you'll be like, ugh, yeah, probably shouldn't have done that. Go and make it right. Go and send a quick text. Hey, this may have came off wrong. Hey, I said this earlier, and this is really what I was saying now that I've processed through it. I was so heated in the moment, this came out. Ask yourself to sit. And then ask God to point you in those areas where you just haven't been truthful, haven't been pure in heart. It beautifully fits when you begin to open yourself up to this kind of examination. Just between you and the great Creator who created you. Keep a clear conscience before God. My last point from tonight's message is trust God in the messy situations. Things get messy. Just because you believe in God, just because you sit and reflect before God and meditate and pray and read the Bible and be nice to others and lead with love, doesn't necessarily mean everything's coming up roses in your life. Just doesn't. Don't panic when things fall apart. Can you imagine if Paul would have panicked in this moment, standing before the Sanhedrin? He was like, this room looks a little divided. Rather than all of them coming at me, I'll just tell them I'm a Pharisee. Tell them what I believe in and watch the show. What feels like disorder may actually be God's way of moving you into protection or moving you into your next assignment, because that's what happened here. That chaos that Paul is in the middle of, created actually, protected him. So pray for perspective rather than control. And instead of asking, why is this happening? Say, God, what are you doing through this? Look for God in the details. It may look chaotic, but look for the calm in the midst of the storm. And that's in every area of your life where there are disruptions, disagreements. There's always some sort of divine redirection. Rest in the sovereignty of God, the all-knowing great I am. And remember that Paul didn't have to fight his way out. God used the conflict to actually rescue him. One of the things that I cannot stand, this is just my personal thought and opinion here, I cannot stand it when people are in the middle of a mess, relationship, job, whatever 110 million things it is, because we all have issues, okay? Whatever messiness there is, they give the credit to the devil, the enemy, Satan. Stop it. Have you ever thought that maybe God's just stirring things up to move you in a different direction, to protect you, to create a divine opportunity for you in the midst of the mess? I'm going to read this scripture verse. It's from James 1, 2-4, and it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." So quit giving the devil credit for the chaos. And because here's the deal, creation blooms in dark places. Seeds need darkness. They need planted. They need covered with soil, dirt, and doo-doo. Okay? That's what it takes. So shitty situations create roots and resilience. God often grows us in the very places where we'd rather escape. And what feels like a burial is often a planting. Trust God in the messy situations. Next week, we are going to continue on in Acts 23. Claudius Lysias decides that he's going to remove Paul from this situation in front of the Sanhedrin, keep him under Roman protection back at the barracks, and this sets the stage for the next phase of Paul's journey. And because now he is going to be sent to Governor Felix in Caesarea. So I hope that you will join me next week as we dive in to that lesson that I already have prepared, and I'm excited for you to receive it. And until we meet again, may you persevere in messy circumstances, because knowing that you are already in God's hands allows you to be okay in the dirty situations of life, because it may just be a divine planting for you to have roots, for resilience, and maybe even some redirection. Love God, love others, love yourself.